My name is David Balfour, and my story begins one morning in June 1751. This was the day I left my father's house in Essendon for the last time. My friend Mr. Campbell was waiting for me. "I'll go with you to the river," said Mr. Campbell. We walked together down the road without speaking. After a while, Mr. Campbell asked, "Are you sorry to leave Essendon?" "I don't know, sir," I replied, "because I don't know where I'm going or what will happen to me. I've been very happy in Essendon, but I've never been anywhere else. My mother and father are dead now, and I'm going to find my future." Mr. Campbell told me that my father had given him a letter before he died. He said that it was my inheritance. "Here's the letter," said Mr. Campbell, giving it to me. "Your father told me to give you the letter and send you to the House of Shaws, near Edinburgh. It's where your father came from, and he wants you to return there." The letter was addressed to Mr. Ebenezer Balfour, House of Shaws. Under the address was written, "This letter will be brought by my son David Balfour." I was surprised because I knew nothing about the House of Shaws. I was only 17 years old, and I felt scared about the new part of my life that was about to begin. Mr. Campbell said goodbye. I looked at Essendon for the last time. Then I turned and walked towards Edinburgh and my future. On the morning of the second day, I came to the top of a hill. Below me, I saw the city of Edinburgh and the sea. There were ships on the sea. I saw a group of English soldiers, the redcoats, marching along the road. When I was closer to Edinburgh, I asked people for directions to the House of Shaws. Everyone seemed surprised when I asked about this house. At first, I thought it was because I looked very poor. But after a while, I thought that there was something strange about the House of Shaws. I began to worry. Before, I imagined a big house with rich relatives. Now, it seemed that this was not true. What is waiting for me at the House of Shaws, I thought. There was only one way to find out. I walked on. Soon I saw a large house standing alone in the bottom of the next valley. It was the House of Shaws. It was not how I imagined. The house was very old and in bad condition. There was no gate at the entrance, no path to the front door, and no smoke came from the chimneys. It looked empty. It was dark when I arrived at the house and there were no lights on. I knocked once on the big wooden door. I waited, but nothing happened. I knocked again. Nothing happened, but I heard someone inside, so I became angry. I started kicking the door and shouting for Mr. Balfour. I heard a sound above me. I looked up, and there was a man with a big gun looking out of the upstairs window. "It's loaded," he said. "I have a letter," I said. "For Mr. Ebenezer Balfour." "Who are you?" the man asked, still holding the gun. "I'm David Balfour," I replied. After a long pause, the man spoke again, but more quietly. "Is your father dead?" he asked. "He must be dead. That's why you're here. I'll let you in." The door opened and I went into the house. "Let me see the letter," the man said. I told him the letter was for Mr. Balfour, not for him. "I am Mr. Balfour," he said. I'm your father's brother, your uncle. I looked at him in surprise. I did not know that my father had a brother. He showed me to a room to sleep in. Then he pushed me inside and locked the door behind me. I wanted to cry. I was tired from my long walk. I lay down and soon fell asleep. The next morning I knocked at the door and shouted until my uncle let me out. We sat at the table and my uncle gave me some breakfast. He did not say much or even look me in the eye. Now and again he asked me a question. "Where's your mother?" he said. I told him that she was also dead. "She was a beautiful girl," he said. The day went on like this. He asked me a question now and again, after long silences. But when I tried to ask him about the letter and my inheritance, he said nothing. I wanted to ask my uncle about my father. "Who was the eldest brother?" I asked. He jumped up. "Why do you ask that?" he said, suddenly taking hold of my jacket. "What do you mean?" I asked him calmly. "Let go of my jacket," I said. He let me go. "Don't ask me about your father," he said. That's why I became angry. I began to think my uncle was mad and maybe dangerous. Later on that night, my uncle gave me some money, 37 gold coins. This was a lot of money. "Why are you giving me this money?" I asked. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing much," he replied. "But I'm getting old, and I need someone to help me around the house." Then he gave me a key. He said it was for a tower at the other end of the house. "Go up the stairs in the tower, find some papers and bring them to me," he said. I unlocked the door to the tower. There was no light inside, and it was very dark. Very slowly, I went up the stairs in the darkness. As I went higher and higher, I began to feel the wind on my legs. The stairs seemed to move under my feet. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning. The sudden light saved my life. I saw in the flash of light that the stairs were old and falling apart. I was going to fall. Why did my uncle send me here? Was he trying to kill me? I was scared, but also very angry. I carefully climbed back down the stairs, using the flashes of lightning to find my way. Then I went back into the kitchen. My uncle was sitting with his back to me and did not hear me come in. I put my hands down heavily on his shoulders. This shocked my uncle. He was an old man, and he fell down to the floor. I left him there and looked for a weapon. My uncle was a danger to me, and I wanted to know why. I found an old dagger. I sat with it and waited. When he opened his eyes, I began to ask questions. "Why don't you want to talk about my father? Why did you give me the money? And most importantly, why did you try to kill me?" The old man looked very weak and tired. "I'll answer your questions in the morning," he said. I locked him in a room and waited for morning. The next morning we had breakfast. While we were eating, I watched my uncle carefully. I was waiting for him to answer my questions, but he said nothing. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw a young boy in sailor's uniform. "I have a letter for Mr. Balfour from Captain Hoseason," the boy said. He showed me the letter. I'm very hungry, he added, hopefully. I let him in, and he finished my breakfast. My uncle read the letter, then gave it to me. Here is what it said. The Hawes Inn at the Queen's Ferry. Sir, if you have any more orders for overseas, you must tell me today. The wind is blowing in the right direction for the ship to leave today. You must also pay your lawyer, Mr. Rankulor, if you don't want to lose more money. Yours sincerely, Elias Hoseason. My uncle told me that he was doing some business with Hoseason, the captain of a ship called the Covenant. Let's go and see him, he said. And then afterwards we could visit Mr. Rankulor, the lawyer. He knew your father. I thought about this and decided to go. I wanted to meet this lawyer, maybe he could answer my questions. And with lots of people around, my uncle can't try to kill me again, I thought. I also wanted to see the sea. Let's go, I said. On the way there I talked to the young sailor, his name was Ransom. My uncle did not speak at all. Ransom told me about the ship, the captain, and the rest of the sailors. He said that Captain Hoseason was violent and was not a very good sailor. Ransom said that a man called Mr. Schwann really knew how to sail the ship. We came to the top of a hill. From there, Ransom showed me the Covenant out at sea. There was also a small boat that took people out to the ship. We walked down the hill and went into the Hawes Inn. It was very warm inside. After a while, I decided to go outside to get some fresh air. When I left, my uncle was talking to Captain Hoseason. Outside, I talked to the owner of the Hawes Inn, and he told me a very interesting story. The story was that Ebenezer killed my father, Alexander, because he wanted the house of Shaws. So Alexander was the eldest son, I asked. Of course he was, said the owner. That's why Ebenezer killed him. So my father was the eldest son. One could not believe my luck. 2 days ago, I was a poor boy with nothing, and now I had a house and some land. I was lost in these thoughts when Captain Hoseason appeared. Do you want to see the inside of my ship? He asked. I was very curious to see inside the Covenant, and I went with Captain Hoseason. So, David, what can I bring back for you? Said Captain Hoseason. A friend of Mr. Balfour's is my friend as well. He, my uncle, and I climbed into the small boat and went across the water towards the Covenant. By the time we arrived at the ship, one thought that Captain Hoseason was a good friend. When we were next to it, I was surprised at how big it was. I was not really listening to what the captain was saying. Hoseason said that I must go on to his ship first. A rope was sent down for me. I was pulled into the air and put down on the deck of the larger ship. Then the captain came up. But where's my uncle? One asked suddenly. I ran to the side of the ship. There was the smaller boat with my uncle still in it. He was going back to the land. Help! Come back, I shouted. My uncle turned to look at me. His cruel face was the last thing I saw. Someone's strong hands held me from behind, and I was hit on the head by something hard. Then everything went black. When I woke up, it was dark. My hands and feet were tied together with rope, and I was in great pain. I was very confused. I knew that I was somewhere inside the ship. It was going up and down with the movement of the waves. I felt seasick. I fell asleep again, but not long afterwards a small man woke me and held a light up to my face. I was very ill. My head hurt. I did not want to eat, and I had a fever. The small man came back with the captain. "You must do something," I heard the man say. "He'll die if you leave him in here." Then the man, Mr. Riak, cut the ropes and carried me upstairs. He put me at the front of the ship with the rest of the crew. Then everything went black again. I stayed here for many days and slowly got better. Ransom told me that the ship was going to America. At this time, white men were still sold as slaves in America. I was certain that this was my uncle's plan for me. He paid Captain Hoseason to sell me as a slave in America. Ransom then told me about the other men. Mr. Riak was a good man, except when he was sober. Mr. Schwan, the man that really knew how to sail the ship, was only dangerous when he was drunk. He often hit Ransom when he was drunk. One night, when Mr. Schwan was drunk, he killed Ransom. Captain Hoseason told me I had to do Ransom's job. I now had to stay in a different part of the ship, with Mr. Schwan. In this part of the ship they kept all the food, drink, and weapons. Later on, we all sat at a table. There was a bottle of brandy in front of Mr. Schwan. He put out his hand to take the bottle, but Mr. Riak stopped him. "You've already killed a boy because you were drunk," he cried. "Now stop," and he threw the bottle of brandy into the sea. Mr. Schwan jumped up. He looked like he was going to kill for the second time that night, but Captain Hoseason stopped him. "Enough," he said. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked Schwan. "You've murdered Ransom." Mr. Schwan seemed to understand. He sat down, covering his face with his hands. "Well, he gave me food on a dirty plate," he said quietly. The captain led Schwan to his bed. "Go to sleep," he said. Mr. Schwan lay down on the bed and started to cry. Now I was Mr. Schwan's servant, but was happy to work because it stopped me from thinking too much about my situation. A week went by. The weather was not good for sailing and we were not getting very far. I thought we were halfway across the Atlantic, but this was not true. We were still sailing south around the west coast of Scotland. One night it was very foggy. At about 10 o'clock, I was serving dinner to Mr. Riak and the captain. We heard a loud noise as the ship hit something. The two men jumped up and went to look. "We've hit a boat in the fog," someone said. The other boat sank to the bottom of the sea with all the crew except one man. This man was brought onto the Covenant. He was a small man. He wore good quality clothes and he had 2 guns and a sword. He and the captain looked at each other. The man told us that his name was Alan Breck Stewart. He was from Scotland, a Jacobite. He fought against the English a few years before. The English won, but their soldiers, the Redcoats, were still looking for Jacobite fighters. Alan Breck was trying to get to France and escape them. He asked Captain Hoseason to take him there. "France," said the captain. No, I can't do that. But I can take you back to Scotland for some money, of course. The captain sent me away to get some food for Alan Breck. When I came back, he was counting out some money on the table. The captain looked excited. Give me half of those coins and I'll take you to Scotland, he said. Alan Breck put his money away. I can't, he said. The money is not mine. It's for my chief. I can't give much of it away, but I'll give you 60 coins if you take me back to Scotland. Take it or leave it. Or I could give you to the redcoats, said the captain. That isn't a good idea. Those soldiers want this money too. They have to give it to King George. If you give me to the redcoats, they won't let you keep any of this money. Well, 60 coins it is. Let's shake hands. The captain left. I cut some meat for Alan Breck and put it in front of him. So, you're a Jacobite, I asked. Yes, he said. And you? I imagine you support King George. Not one or the other, I said, because I did not want to make him angry. There's no more brandy, he said. I want a drink for my 60 coins. I went to get the key to the brandy cupboard from the captain. It was still foggy outside. I saw the captain talking to Mr. Riach and I heard what they were saying. They were planning to kill Alan Breck so that they could take the rest of his money. When I heard this, I felt scared and angry. I did not want to be on a ship with such dishonest, violent men. My first thought was to run away, but I decided not to. I stepped forward. Captain, I said, the man wants some brandy and the bottle is empty. Can I have the key to get some more? The men were surprised to hear my voice and turned around quickly. That's the answer, said Hoseason to Mr. Rack. David can get the guns. He knows where they are. Then he turned to me and said, Listen, David. That man is a danger to the ship, and we must do something about it. The problem is this. David, all our weapons are locked in the room he is in now. If I go in and take the guns, he'll know something is wrong. But if you go in and take a gun or two, he won't notice. If you do this, you can have some of the money too. I'll remember this when we arrive in America. I agreed to help them, but really I did not know what to do. They were thieves and murderers and I did not trust them. But then what chance did one man, Alan Breck, and one boy, me, have against a whole crew? I walked back into the room where Alan was eating, and I made a decision. Do you want to be killed? I asked him. He jumped up quickly. They've murdered a boy already, and now they want to kill you, I said. Will you help me? He asked. I will, I said. Now we looked around to see how to defend ourselves. There were 2 doors into the room and 1 small window. We closed one of the doors and left the other one open. He took out his sword and gave me all the guns. Now listen to me, he said. How many men are there? 15, I said. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. I'll watch this door, where the main fight will be. You must use the guns and watch the other door. I told him I was not a very good shot. If they try to open the door, you must shoot, he said. Now, what else do you have to watch? The window, sir, I said. But how can I watch both at the same time? When I'm looking at one of them, my back is towards the other. That's true, said Alan. But don't you have any ears? Of course, I said. I must listen for the sound of breaking glass. Exactly, said Alan. Meanwhile, the captain was still waiting for me to return with the guns. Finally, he came to the door. Alan stopped him with his sword. What's this, said Hoseason. I save your life, and you show me a sword. I know what you're planning, said Alan. Now get your men together, I want to start this fight as soon as possible. The captain looked at me.